Hello, and welcome to the Storied Arcs podcast, your podcast home for deep dives into indie and creator-owned comic books. Today, we have a very special treat, and that is an exclusive interview with Liana Kangas, the artist for the series that we just covered, Know Your Station. We think you're really going to enjoy this one, and I don't want to waste any more time with an introduction. Suffice it to say, listen to this, enjoy it thoroughly, give us a 5-star rating, go follow Liana on social media. Be sure to track for different events and cons. Meet them in person. Delightful human being and very gifted artist. And be sure to share this episode with a friend. And without any further ado, here is Liana Kangas. Let's get going. Liana, what is your comic origin story? Are you a longtime comic reader? Are you an artist who found comics later? What's your entry point?
My entry point probably is the Archie Digests at the grocery store when I was young. I would often be able to buy them, I think once every couple months or something like that. But that was just enough to reread a couple times until I hit middle school, high school. And a lot of my friends and I would swap back manga from Barnes and Noble. I would often be able to find some single issues of Spider-Man and stuff. But I think the first time I visited my local comic shop, which is Famous Faces and Funnies, was, I think it was first or second year of high school. I was trying to find issues of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Embarrassing. But went in there, started flipping through, found some Robin single issues. That's how I started collecting a long time run of Robin, and he's one of my favorite characters, and it kind of built from there. I've always been an artist. I grew up in a family of artists. My grandparents who raised me ran an art studio sort of thing where they would sell goods that they made or other artists made. My mom was a singer-songwriter, kind of a writer poet, and she also dabbled a little bit in visual arts. But my grandpa was he was a teacher for, let's see, somewhere in Arizona. He was an art teacher, and just generally tried to always influence any type of passion that I had for visual arts. So early on, I painted an oil painting. Even though I went to an engineering college, I still took live drawing classes and things like that. And in the meantime, I would take things like sequential storytelling in college, anything I could find that was a visual art elective, I would take. I think that was even a podcast class. I don't even remember at this point. One of my last
we haven't even taken a podcast class.
Yeah.
We would benefit greatly from it.
It might have been web design also podcast stuff. My old teacher, Dr. Freeman, he would try to give us multiple outlets to discover connection and socializing and stuff. But one of my last papers was on dissecting 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's the only thing I really remember from college. So it started from there. I would go back to Famous Faces and help out a lot. I would help at the conventions. Rick was so great at really inspiring a very communal space, safe space, did 24-hour comic day. I met most of my friends there. I would drag my friends there if they didn't read comics. Very in the community. And after college, when I did my day job, I spent a lot of my money still going to conventions and started to collect art. And when I moved to Toronto, I found a job helping work at the Labyrinth. So it was sort of helping managing. And, working at a shop was a lot different than my old day job. I was a marketing coordinator prior, and switching to see the complete opposite side of socializing. Now this is normal for us, right? You talk to creators and stuff all the time, but talking to customers, I had retail experience in the past from being a key holder at retail stores and things like that. But being a key holder or some sort of manager type at a comic shop is a lot different, because you're not only meeting fans, but I worked at one next to an animation college. So like I would meet young animators who like, I would meet people that ended up doing like these major scenes in movies that are iconic to me, animators that worked on some of my favorite movies. And they really inspired me to start. My friend Daryl Graham, he was an animator on like Space Jam and Sector 9, and he does a lot of work with gorillas. He was like a huge inspiration to me. And he was like, why haven't you drawn comics yet? He's like, you're drawing all the time. Like, you love storytelling. Why haven't you done this? So that was like a little bit of the push that I sort of needed because while working at the shop, I was pursuing illustration. And I didn't quite know like what direction I really wanted to go in. And that kind of was the push that I needed. And like we were just talking earlier, Canada has an insanely dense community of comic creators. So being able to go to like TCAF, which is Toronto Comics Arts Festival, it's a free festival at the Toronto Public Library. I got to meet some of my favorite creators, of people who I've read for a while, got to talk to them, ask a little bit of advice, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And that was, I think, 2014. And I'm a big, I guess on the podcast you can't see, I'm a big comic collector anyway. I mostly collect single issues, which you cannot see because that is too embarrassing of a number that I would like to give out publicly. But my
I
trade
would love to
paperback
see. We need to do like a
hardcover.
showdown between you and Alex.
Yeah, my trade paperback and hardcover. Well, I mean, when you help out at a shop starting in 2006, 2007,
Yeah,
something like that, and then work at a shop for a year and a half, 2 years, and then become friends. I mean, my local shop, Memphis Comic and Collectibles, like they're so amazing to me. Like they immediately know like what I'll want, and they'll like set a whole bunch of stuff aside for me. They'll order everything I want. Like, yeah, it's just it piles up a little bit, but as someone who's like really enthusiastic, I'm not only a creator, but I'm a huge fan of comics, right? Like that's absolutely why I got into it, is because I love the medium more than anything. It's like one of the most inspiring mediums of all time. It gives me a lot of inspiration and a lot of passion towards limitless storytelling. And growing up, seeing all these creators do all of that seamlessly, like by themselves, is incredible. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you, as a fan of comics as well, or manga, or any kind of sequential kind of art storytelling. So being an illustrator and having an artist background, do you think this is something you would have gravitated to eventually anyway, just because you had grown up with it and been a fan of it and consumed it as well? So beyond just like you say, you took maybe you took a class in sequential art storytelling, so you had some instruction on it as well. But do you think this is an area you would have gone towards with your art anyway, simply because you were in it? Like you would eventually found your way to doing interiors and doing storytelling.
That is such a good question, and 100%, yeah. When I was doing oil painting at my old day job, there were times where I would like take a song. I have it somewhere, and I'm really interested in finding it and trying to post it. But like I would take like one of my favorite songs is from Queens of the Stone Age at the time, and like do a whole sequential page based on that for no reason. So like at the time, I didn't know that I was like writing and drawing something, a comic page, but I just thought it looked cool. So I was like, I'll do this, right? And now looking back at that, that was 2011, maybe something earlier, probably something way earlier, actually, that I was always drawn towards the more illustrative, like graphic side of things. And so like, I love collecting like screen printed band posters. I love collecting comic art. So I think the more things that I would want to draw were things that I would want to see, hence that kind of, I definitely think so. Because like even visiting conventions and talking to creators, I'm sure one of them would be like, why don't you draw comics? Just like Daryl did. Like, and with the internet and Twitter and everything, like there were a lot of folks along the way that like really like kind of helped push me, like Gail Simone, writing one of my favorite Batgirl runs, and then
Might be one of the greatest people on the internet. One of the few great people left on Twitter is Gail Simone. I mean,
yeah. And like meeting, I landed at a really weird spot when I decided to start pursuing comics. I lived in the same town, coincidentally, didn't know, as Erica Schultz. Erica Schultz, an amazing writer. I loved her work, and I saw that she was signing out a shop one day, so I wanted to swing by and thank her for, like, she had this blog at the time that I very much connected with because she talked about her personal stuff, but like in a lens that was like still protective of herself. And I just told her, like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I really appreciate like you posting about that, because I had gone through something similar recently. And like, lo and behold, we ended up becoming friends, which is amazing. She's one of the most phenomenal people I've ever met. And we got to collaborate. She invited me to collaborate on my first Image anthology. And, you know, it's friends like that and creators like that see a creator like me, and not to say that I would never create on my own, but having the support and like the want and belief from another creator that you respect so heavily be like, oh yeah, that's going to be amazing, you need to do that, like, sign me up. That's a point driven that, you know, would have existed at some point, but even, you know, fuels the fire when it's by somebody, you know, you read all the time. So
sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't like to date the podcast like this, but just a little shout out that I think you will both be in Lexington, Kentucky for March 7th through 10th for the Lexington Comic-Con.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
you can meet Liana and Erica, and they've got a lot of TBA slots there as of mid-January. I'm like, yeah, that's only a 90-minute drive for us from Cincinnati, so I'm strongly considering going to that convention again.
Please do. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this convention.
It's 90 minutes. I'll absolutely drive down there. I mean, if it's within like 4 hours, if I can drive to it, it's a convention. I'm probably going to end up showing up there.
Yeah, especially if your
I definitely don't have a problem. I can definitely stop whenever I want.
Yeah.
But if there are local conventions nearby, small, big, large, I'm probably stopping by. So Lexington, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
You know, I heard a lot of amazing things about this convention from like James Maddox and Gavin Smith. And so I'm really excited to be invited. And, you know, I really hope everyone gets to come and enjoy the convention with us, because this will be my first time.
Huge celebrity one. I mean, right now the comic creators are what we're waiting on, but the celebrity list is absolutely nuts for being, you know, Lexington, Kentucky in early March. So
it's a pretty good draw. So
yeah, if they do a very nice
listen to
job.
this in time, then definitely come on down in mid-March.
So one question I have for you, I have so many that spawned off of your original answer, but we'll try to filter this into the appropriate bucket and, you know, keep a reasonable time restraint here. But I wanted to talk to you about your preferred method for creation, whether you do physical, you know, pencils on paper, or whether you like to work digitally. I see that you have a lot of original comic art from other people hanging on your wall, which would make me think that you prefer an analog method, but, you know, no judgment here. I think they're both perfectly valid mediums.
Yeah.
Personal preference.
So I originally was completely and utterly analog until, I want to say, 2015. I got my first Cintiq. And I can't quite tell you the reason why I wanted one, but I just wanted one so desperately, thinking that it would probably up my game. You know, again, I had heard from all the animators that I would see all the time that they had them. And, you know, switching from analog to digital was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I pursued and persevered. And I was doing it for fun. It wasn't like I had art as a main day job at that time. I was doing it, you know,
it wasn't like a deadline for you, right?
There were no deadlines. Or if there were, it was an anthology. It was like 4 pages, and, you know, get this done when you can. Great. Okay. So it was nice because I did at that time have the time to experience and build my skill set of totally drawing in a different way. What I would say is, I prefer drawing sequentially digitally because it's faster. Deadlines are a lot tighter. You know, a lot of us are doing an issue a month. And in my case, because I'm doing multiple shorts for different publishers and covers and everything like that. Doing it digitally is just so much faster for me and like allows me to make sure that number one, quality, number two, if there's notes that I have to do and change anything for like an IP holder, like likenesses or the design of a character or anything like that, it's just easier to change. The majority of my covers are done traditionally on paper, and I prefer that anyway, just because you really get like there's like a lot more energy with ink and paper, I think. And I think that's why I get so many cover gigs. I love doing covers. It's like one of my favorite things to do. It's one of the first things that I really wanted to do in comics because I love illustrating. And I love, reading other people's stories. So, however, I have done a couple shorts traditionally, like my Guar short that I did was traditional. I have a couple conflicting feelings. Number one is taking up space. Like if the pages don't sell, that's a lot of paper wasted and sits in a box. And for someone who has had to go through an artist's entire house, after they pass and everything, it's like a big burden to figure out like, okay, do I sell this? Do I gift this to family members? Do I gift this to friends? And I kind of like don't really want that burden to be placed on someone. And especially since I already have a collection of my own, right? And so I try to be very picky about what stories I do traditionally, and I try to do them if I write and draw my own thing.
Yeah. My wife did ask me last year. It was bad timing. She happened to ask me the week of my birthday, like, if you die, what am I supposed to do with all your comics? It's like with the clear implication being
a jarring question with zero answer to be returned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
the guitars and like the guitars and the amps and the pedals. She's like, who would even handle all like, she's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at.
She wouldn't. Yeah. I've had very many conversations. Like I'm obviously a dark comedy, very dark humor in this house. I have had very many wouldn't it be funny conversations with some of my closest friends to be like, okay, you have to handle this stuff. You have to handle this stuff, Though my partner is pretty knowledgeable about all the stuff. I think in the reverse, I also would be like, oh, I'm going to ask this person, this person, this person, this, like you just got to get communal help, I think, at that point.
Got to know who to reach out to.
Yeah. Well, I was honestly, I was like, wait, in this scenario, I'm dead and it's not my problem, right? Like,
you're like,
just figure that out yourself.
Why am I dying? Why am I the one dying?
Yeah.
Well, because it's your stuff here. Someone else to do with it.
Yeah.
Right. I have to imagine, unless my brother and I were to unfortunately die at the exact same time, all of my stuff would be, it would fall to him and he would know what to do with it. Because all the stuff that I'd have to get rid of, like statues and Legos and comics and things like that, are stuff that he understands as well. And I have to imagine if in the event of his untimely passing, maybe my sister-in-law would know enough to be like all these comic books, what do I do with this? All these action figures and Star Wars toys and things like that. What do we do with that? I imagine that burden would fall to me as well. So less communal and more just, I know my brother and I would probably have to do that for each other. Yeah.
I have 3 nieces and a nephew, and I want them all to get first pick. Like whatever you want, because if they end up liking anything that I like, number one, I did my job. Number two, wish I could have enjoyed it with you, but at least, you'll have something that you want, because I also have like a giant record collection. Like
just preemptively write a few weird inscriptions in the front of books just in case one of your nicknames picks them up.
That's incredibly dark and I love it. Yeah.
Like, I knew you would pick this.
My brother's got 2 kids. I 2 young kids. I've got a young niece and nephew, and he's, shout out to my brother. He has done a very good job trying to indoctrinate them into these same types of things that we liked growing up, to the point where he actually tried really hard to get both my niece and nephew like really into Star Wars, and it didn't quite work. And then all of a sudden, because my nephew, who's the younger one, would just see things like online or whatnot, all of a sudden got like super into Star Wars, kind of like on his own. And my brother was just like,
that's how you do it. Yeah.
It was like, it was enough there to sprinkle on there for him to get into it, and then he got
Did
into
he
it
do
on
the
his own.
Raider thing?
Yeah. He's so happy, and so yeah, it is. I'm not going to lie and say he wasn't a little worried about like what if they're not into the things that I like. And they seem to be kind of moving towards that way, which is it's great for me too, as the uncle who gets to parachute in and to be like I know the things that you like. I can relate, and I know how to buy gifts. I can buy gifts and presents because it's the same stuff that I would buy. So It is great. Yeah, it is great. I mean, I got my niece comic books for Christmas.
That's so sweet.
Younger reader, early reader books, and she dove right in and spent most of that holiday the rest of that time just like buried reading these books over and over again. They were the Dogman books, the Dave Pilkey books.
Oh, cute. Yeah.
And so yeah, she dove right in and absolutely loved them, thinking this is fantastic. That's like an all-time gift. I can always give her comics. If I can always do that or comic related, that's fantastic.
That's the thing I'm most excited about, because I'll get like Casey Gilly sent me her entire run of My Little Pony because I was like, I want my nieces to read some of this stuff so bad, but I'm trying to just like gentle delivery, no worries, no big deal if you don't read it or whatever. But I gifted that whole run to my youngest niece, and she looked so excited pulling it out like of the present or whatever, and I was just like, yes, thank you, Casey Gilly.
Major points.
But we as adults, like, we want so desperately to have that one thing to connect with, people that we're helping raise or whatever. And I'm very grateful. My mom is the entire reason why I enjoyed Star Wars. She's the one that made us watch it. I think I watched The Dark Crystal when I was like 5 or 6, which is like, a movie. Yeah. I think I watched it when I was 8, like just a very,
well, that explains a lot actually. In terms of maybe where some of your stories go and
horror stuff.
I already made a note since you expressed such a strong interest in Space Odyssey, because when we did our discussion of Know Your Station, we were debating some Howl vibes from the AI. We were like, is this intentional, or is this just like an influence that I'm bringing into the work with me? But if we transition there, how did you get connected with Sarah Gailey and their work?
So quick pause real quick with the
Sure.
Space Odyssey. I just want to let you know, if no one's read Seeds of Eden yet, I co-wrote a story, Seeds of Eden, with Joe Corallo, that Paul Azaceta drew for TKO. And if you like 2001: A Space Odyssey, you should also read that, because you can tell where a lot of my inspiration comes from. But Sarah Gailey, I got an email from my editor, Elizabeth Bray. I think it was not this past year, but the year before, around my birthday. And I was like, this is the best birthday ever. Because I had been wanting a chance to work with Elizabeth for a really long time. She's actually who got me integrated into working with Lucasfilm and Star Wars. And inevitably, the transfer passed, and I ended up working with Heather Antos with Star Wars and Star Trek instead. So this was like my opening of being like, oh, cool, finally I get to work with Elizabeth. And in the email was the premise and the pitch for Know Your Station. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I had never heard of Sarah Gailey before. So I did a little bit of Googling after I read the script, which when I read the pitch out loud, one of my friends was over at my place and was like, that sounds like a perfect book for you. And I was like, I know, it sounds too good to be true, right? Like, a little bit. So I started looking up Sarah Gailey, and just by happenstance, I think I was going on a vacation shortly thereafter. So I was like, I'll just read one of their books on my vacation. That's what people do, right? Read books. I read The Echo Wife in 2 days, and I was like, oh, well, this is probably a project I want to take if I really enjoy their writing and prose, because I think that would be a really fun collaboration. Gailey and I met with the entire team of Boom when we started doing the preliminary work for character design and what the book should look like, and working with Boom. That was my first time working with Boom. So it was really cool to see like their process and like integrate into that. And mostly Gailey and I worked backwards from how I usually collaborate with writers or other people on books, which is usually I'm friends with someone and then we work together. And so we worked together and had really good boundaries of like figuring out like, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question? Like, and our editor was always really amazing. Both Elizabeth and Maya were great at being like wrapping us all together and being like, hey, what do you guys think of this issue? Like just kind of making sure we were in touch. So one of the issues I was working on, I messaged Gailey and I was like, hey, I was thinking about this for this panel. What do you think? And then it just kind of spiraled from there being like, okay, what movie should I watch before I work on this issue or whatever? And so we started exchanging and inevitably, which becoming friends. Working on this book was incredible. We actually did a panel at San Diego Comic-Con to talk about how to communicate and collaborate with new people and establish really firm boundaries, but also like respect one another. And, in our case, we got to become friends, which maybe doesn't happen very often. Maybe it happens all the time. I don't know. But I felt really lucky. And so I was like, this is really important for us to like share our experience because I'm sure this happens a lot, but we don't ever talk about it. Right. And so I was like, if this worked so well for us because we had the opportunity to communicate in a way that was respectful of us doing work because we're doing our job, but also become friends, right? Like, and it's not a proximity friendship because everybody that works in freelance comics typically doesn't work in an office. Yeah. So it's nice to have like an organic friendship like develop over time and like, especially with, a working relationship. So, that's inevitably how we got introduced to each other, which was drawing gruesome murders and bonding over it.
Yeah.
I guess, which is really funny.
I have to say, I expect it to be a really strong, positive work environment from Sarah Gilly, given the themes of their work, which are all like, anti-exploitation, capitalist workers' rights, whether it's Eat the Rich or Know Your Station. So it's like, yeah, it's really nice to hear that the first conversation is about boundaries and how to communicate respectfully and all these other things that, they're not only writing about this, but they're modeling.
Yeah, absolutely. They're one of the most thoughtful, empathetic, and honestly, they're incredible about like reading people in the room and everything. It's honestly a magic power I think that they have that I hope to one day garner a percentage of because it's really cool. I look up to them a lot. So
yeah. And I think you can see, that empathy, the ability to read in the way their characters are written. These are
absolutely
not, even though like some of this would lend itself to like, it's kind of more about the story and the concept than it is about the characters. So the characters could be flat and one-dimensional, it would still work, but they're not. They're layered and they're complicated characters in a setting that's driving the story. And so, we've talked a little bit about how Know Your Station came to be. We were opining on the podcast. I'm going to screen share with you, even though this is an audio medium. It's just great content for the people listening. But just one page in particular that we were just kind of like oohing and awing over was here. And we were wondering, what a script, what a script looks like. No, I mean, clearly you had a blast with this.
So just real quick, for everyone listening here, if you listened to us last week and we talked about, Mike and I talked about the differences between the various living quarters on the station. You had a very kind of plain and austere for the staff, but when you get up into the higher, wealthier residences, they actually have things. They own things, and a lot of them are relics from the old world here. And so early on here, we're in this room, and this
the Peloton, the iPod Classic,
the Peloton that's in the plexiglass encasement. You have the Hamilton poster, the Dare sweater. I don't know if we mentioned it, but I believe it's a Furby in the background there as well.
It is. And the denim bear, I forgot what that's called. The doodle bear.
Oh, and
oh my gosh.
Honestly, we didn't mention the surfboard with the "Never Forget" graffitied on it,
right,
and picture of the
9/11
the
memoriam.
World Trade Center.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, just the idea that, we assume that these insanely rich people at this time have no connection or any idea of what any of this stuff is, and it's more about the fact that they can own things at all is what's important, as evident, like the fact that the exercise bike is like this.
They feel a right to own archival pieces.
Yeah,
but
they have no connection to what it is. It isn't like it's meaningful to them in any way. Earlier we mentioned the first kind of scene is one of the residents loses a necklace that it had a piece of the Challenger puzzle, the Challenger space shuttle, and so them just, again, not knowing anything, probably you assume knowing nothing about the Challenger or the history, anything like that. It was just they owned something at all. They could have these possessions. And so what we were wondering about that page and the specific references that are there, if that is something that are those like inside jokes between you and Sarah, or were they specific things, as things you wanted to put in? Did they have any deeper meaning, or is it just about having fun on a page and doing the most kind of silly off the wall thing?
One of the first things that I realized when I read this script was how hilarious I thought that Gailey was, and how desperately I wanted to work on this project, even though I was already signed on. And I just pulled up the script because this is the first time. We've always talked about this panel in a lot of things, but no one's ever asked specifically about how it was developed. And I need you to understand that when I read this script, again, I didn't really know Gailey very well, and we weren't on like daily talking terms, but for you all, and hopefully I'm allowed to do this, but I want to read this panel description to you.
Yes.
Okay.
And
yeah,
eventually
definitely.
later on, things did become mutually like Easter eggy and like inside jokey, especially because we were talking every day. But at this point, issue 1 had no contact other than like official boom meetings. So panel 6, big view of the main room of the Fair Milk Suite. This entire suite is giving Apple Store. White, sleek, streamlined, minimalist. There are artifacts, in quotes, in plexi cases around the perimeter of the room. A Peloton, an original iMac, a 9/11 Never Forget commemorative surfboard, a Hamilton poster, a framed Dare Christmas sweater, a huge oil painting of Ronald Reagan in front of an erupting volcano hangs on one wall. Elise and Pritchard stand just inside the elevator entrance. Pritchard is gesturing at the expanse of white, bewildered. Her plexi armor is halfway gone, returning in ripples to the point of origin.
Wow.
Yeah.
All that's in the script. That is fantastic.
When I read that, I was like, okay, this is going to be a lot of work, but this is going to be the funniest thing I ever draw.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
How easily that they just said it's giving Apple stores. I'm like, got it. Immediately got it done.
And I think what the knowing now what your history was with Sarah, in terms of at this point you had only you just got paired together pretty much. You hadn't.
Yeah,
this is early on here, and this is in the first issue. So yeah, you're talking about early script. You don't really know what their vibe is going to be, but you read a panel description like that, and I think you're right. I think they're in fact, just hearing that gives you almost the entire vibe of the book. You understand what their sense of humor is, what they're going for, and the fact that it was so hyper, but like the fact that it was a Dare Christmas. I mean, obviously you look at it, it's red and green, so you think about that, but that was in the script. I
didn't want to take too many liberties too, because like when you have like, because I don't know if like these specific items come into play later on.
Sure.
So what I only added like the Furby, the Doodle Bear, the Caboodle, and things like that. Things from my childhood that I was like, wouldn't this be funny in the background, But yeah, exactly. Having not known them at all and then being like, this is the funniest thing I've ever read. Specifically, the commemorative surfboard has come into play in a lot of inside jokes like in the future. So it's Nice.
So, so because of that, as the two of you work more and more, as you work together, going through the series, did the scripts change at all in terms of like that, in terms of that's a hyper descriptive, like you read that and you get the entire scene. You have to draw, but you understand what's there. I know, depending on who the collaborators are, if they've worked together for years or are friends outside of whatever, outside of work, your panel descriptions can be like 4 words, and that's everyone
a
just
lot
knows.
looser.
Yeah, we're all on the same page. So did those scripts change as you worked through, as the two of you just talked more and more and were speaking more than just like trading work back and forth? Did the type of things that showed up in the script start to change by the time you got to like issue 5?
Absolutely. Yeah. What's really cool is they would message me to be like, hey, I was thinking about doing a scene like this. How do you feel about that? And I'm like, amazing. Like there's not very many times where I'd be like, yeah. And then there would be times when I look at a script and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I add this or like change a little bit of this or whatever? And then we would riff off each other, right? Like their ideas would always elevate, like, the whole thing. And I'd suggest something and then it would turn into this amazing thing. So like they truly let me like start enveloping into the collaborative, like the creative process. And I'm very grateful because that book I'm so proud of, working on it with them. And it's really funny to me. It's a really good, very intense story.
And a very potent one too, right? I mean, it's a jarring twist that I read a fair bit of mystery in really this genre. And I can't say there were no breadcrumbs, but I was shocked at the end result. And then it kind of ends so abruptly. Like, it's like 6 months later, they built this new society. Here's like 3 pages of like what things look like after kind of the revolution. And the rest is left to your imagination. And I think I was saying like a lesser writer would have felt the need to do like a flashback issue and show like, here's how things went wrong on Earth. And it's like, like there's kind of enough there that I was able to fill all that in. It's like, clearly the health of the Earth has deteriorated to the point where the rich were like, okay, not our problem anymore. We've got the technology to go live in space and we just need to get enough people off to come serve us. And
we don't have to visualize it because we're already experiencing it, right? Like,
right.
Unfortunately,
what would 24 pages of that
we're already on? Of course,
So just some master strokes of storytelling there. We had a blast reading it and discussing it. I do want to honor your time, so we have questions about True Cult and the Meanwhile Comic Shop Anthology, which we could just give you real quick and you can say as much or as little as you want, or we can just say it might be a discussion for another time. But when I got your signature on Know Your Station at the Columbus GalaxyCon, the book you were excited about and talking about was True Cult, which I then bought from you and have since read. And I'm not familiar with Scott Bryan Wilson, but loved it. Great sense of humor. Everything you've said so far, I'm like, oh yeah, True Cult's right up there with a dark sense of humor, and almost comedy forward. But I wouldn't call the book like a straight comedy. It's plays with a few different genres, but there's a lot of variation in paneling and framing in that book. And I'm thinking even in the first issue, after he does his little mini heist and he's sitting there interviewing someone at the burger place and you see the cops pull in, it's very cinematic framing. I don't have it digitally, otherwise I put it on the screen, but it's almost like watching the camera pan with the character's attention. And as the cops are, ordering their burgers at the counter, the person talking. And that was where I thought, if anything, I would have had the letterer just write gibberish, because it's like, I'm not really listening to the person across from me anymore. But you were able to capture so much of that. I was like, I don't know if you've ever considered directing, but it felt like a cinematography trick, right?
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. Thank you so much. One of the reasons why, so Scott and I met when I lived in Jersey. He came up to my table when I was tabling at New Jersey Comic Expo and was like, "Hey, I'm a big fan of your work," and I was just like, what? And turned out like I had collected some of his I think he did a Batman short with John Paul Leon and things like that, and I had read some of his work prior, and I was like, he was like, "Hey, if you ever want to collaborate, let me know," and so we ended up getting to talking, and we had the same like interest in film and horror, which hence why True Cult is a very cinematic experience, if you will, sort of, if I can use those words. And he and I were trying to figure out, okay, what's a good story that we'd both be really into and like really proud of. And he had this idea for True Call, and he let me take some liberties in changing a couple things like that would make it more fun for me to draw. And it was just something I really believed in. I grew up in the realm of Clerks and all that stuff was pretty prevalent. And if for those folks who really enjoyed that and like the old Saturday like Nickelodeon stuff and like right. All that and things like that, this very much is kind of like a very interesting love letter to like 90s humor and like just absurdity. And we both worked in food service, and I just think honoring this type of like collection of characters who have relationships with each other that aren't romantic, that aren't, it's not a slasher, it's not things like that. In genuine, it becomes like a friendship to, honor that in an authentic way, to show like, when you're suffering in your teens and you're at a fast food job and you have to make comrades in arms at this job to survive and not be miserable. That's kind of like that. But we wanted to put a little twist on it with like a heist and, right. Music and things like that, everything that we love. So
the supernatural really element there and all that. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I think
yeah.
And Clerks is a great comparison.
Yeah.
I have to say, the thing that made me laugh loudest was the place they're working is called Burger Lords, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I just thought was like, okay, it's just Burger King's, because you see it in print a few times, and then when you see the logo, and it's basically the Dogma Buddy Christ, but like a much older.
You caught that reference,
and
I think like, you're the only person who has.
And I was
first
like,
thing I thought it was, yeah, well,
yeah, and I was like,
right.
I just thought it was going to be like, oh, like a medieval thing, but it was like, no. They've pushed this to the realm of deifying their burgers.
Well, no, when they start going through the various other menu items, like as you read through the book and you hear the names of like the meals and things like that, and then that's when it turned for me like, oh no, yeah, right. Burger Lord isn't just a Burger King play. You're right. This isn't a monarchy thing. This is Lord thing here. And no, and to have that then mixed with that, this supernatural element and this absurdist kind of feel to it, and are having the two characters, or at least I guess the three main characters for fast food characters, and just the way that they view the world through working at this restaurant, which again is absurd to the nth degree in terms of how they see the world, but yet it basically allows them to survive this experience because they don't think on the same plane as everybody else, as like a quote unquote regular person. They view it through their own kind of deification of working at this fast food chain. There's a level of absurdity, but there is also, yes, there is that Clerks level thing of if you ever worked at a fast food restaurant. If you just had a job as a young person, as a teen, working with other teens, meaning that your coworkers and your bosses are all within a couple of years of you, there's that shared experience right there and what that can be like. I think that definitely comes off in True Cult. Never had to deal with any actual cults when I was doing it as a kid, but I mean, there's a relatability to the idea of, these are your people, and they become friends by default.
Right.
And then I guess from here we see in True Cult what that can be if you're there for an extended period of time. If that becomes what your life is, what that bond can be like.
I think because like Scott and I were kind of friends or like becoming friends when we were working on this and like brought in our other friends to work with us, it made it like thematically accidentally that. And obviously, there's a ton of other themes that Scott touches base on if folks like dialogue. I'm a big fan of dialogue in comics, and one of my favorite things that he does is really digs into like the hopelessness of someone who has happily drudged through their life at a bare minimum and then understands like, oh, I might want more, but I don't know quite what that is, right? And so it touches base on unsaid things in friendships or unsaid understandings and loyalty in friendships and things like that. And I just think he does such a phenomenal job. And it's why I had so much fun working on this. Specifically, just because, like, you know, creating these characters with Scott and being able to enjoy them with people as an outward, like, you know, once it's like out of my hands, right? Like people enjoy it how they want to enjoy it. And so I love these discussions about, and that's why, Mike, when we met at Columbus, like I was so excited to be like, okay, if you liked that, you'll like this because Gailey also loves this. And Scott and Gailey, you know, both incredible writers, love each other's work as well. So it's like kind of cool. Like it's that community, like shuffle of all like really enjoying each other's comics, and I'm very appreciative. So
there's a through line there of there's absurdist humor, there's a horror element to it, supernatural element, there is social commentary, and there's also social satire that's working, I think, in all these in these books here that we've kind of been touching on, where there's a larger theme going on there. There's the actual narrative of what's happening, but then there's the larger theme that it's commenting on that reflects back on some part of our world, of our society that, you know, maybe we don't do so well, you know, whether that is, you know, this kind of this income gap, this wealth gap in our society, the way that we treat those that we deem as lesser than us, or things of that nature, or
exactly
the structures that we've set up in our world that force people to do things that that maybe we can't, that we think is are unconscionable, or putting people to a limit to where they would do things that we think would be beyond what a normal person would want to do. And they're all tied in there. And yes, at the same time, you get all these messages, and yet there is an incredible amount of humor, an incredible amount of heart in these characters. And you get some really, truly kind of beautiful art there, either drawn by you. We talked about Pius Bach and who drew Eat the Rich there. So you get this great mix of ideas and kind of feelings and emotion with these stories that I think both Gailey and Scott Bryan Wilson have done, which I think something that Mike and I like to celebrate and really like to see.
Yeah. Last question we have before we get into promoting whatever else you're working on, anything coming up you want to talk about. Just a real quick hit on the 7-page Absence is Unsettling, which Alex, you gave me a heads up on that.
Yeah. So
I'll just I'll slap that up on the screen real quick.
You contributed to the Meanwhile, a comic shop anthology, which is a project that I heard about because the two guys that put it together and edited it, Ryan Higgins and Kevin Sharp, they're guys that I like internet know them in terms of I've interacted with them for a long time. Ryan Higgins owns a comic shop out in Sunnyvale, California. He hosts a podcast with the guys who work and shop at his shop. I've been out there. I used to have family who lived in Northern California. And so I've been to both his old location and the new location. And so when they said they were putting this anthology together with the prompt, I guess the prompt was, it was just the comic shop experience, I guess, I think what it was. And so I'm just curious how you got involved in that. And I got to say, after hearing your intro earlier about having the shop you grew up kind of around and dragging your friends to it and working at it, and see that you have a connection to comic shops other than just being a customer. But I'm curious how you got involved in this project, and also a little bit about what your inspiration was for your story here.
Yeah. Thank you for asking about this. This is a very personal piece, actually, that I don't think a lot of people have read. Kevin invited me to be a part of this anthology when they were first starting out. We often see each other at conventions, and so I got to hear about all the amazing people that started to join it. I was very proud of him, very proud of both of them. This is such a beautiful book. Like,
Book,
shops are so important to me. Comic shops are crucial for what we do. And when he asked, I said, absolutely, anything to help you guys out. I didn't even really know what to expect for this. And when I originally did this piece, I actually did a silent comic. So minus the first, I think, page, I had developed this story based off of a story that I've wanted to tell for a really long time. I think it stemmed from like in my early 20s that I just like never wrote down. And so I was like, oh, this is a perfect excuse to like do whatever I want and like contribute it and, whatever. And Kevin, who edited it, came back and was like, hey, like I'd really love to see a way that this ties in with a comic shop somehow. And I was like, oh, I got you. Because of the fact that this was a story that I had been thinking about since my early 20s, I wanted to touch base about, some very dark and negative things that have happened while I've been in the comics community. There's a lot of gatekeeping that I've experienced. There's a lot of, not too kind things that I've run into, being I guess pursuing comics for me is a lot different than most people. So I took the opportunity to kind of have like this monologue about how I appreciate the very specific people who I have run in my life who have made those very negative things or those negative experiences almost kind of dissipate into the foundation of my growth in the comics community and being a comic creator and everything, and how much I value the time I get to see them because it's so very short, and the support and pride and belief that they entrust in me. I actually drew a lot of real people in the first page, mostly people who have really kickstarted my career, and very intimate experiences at that time, like like a conversation being held on an escalator is one of them, and a conversation being held in a public bathroom with like 30 people is one of them. And so I just really wanted to showcase some of the people that I love, that I couldn't do what I do without them, and that they make, they are a part of my work in some sort of way. And I think that that was important for someone who has not only worked in a shop, but also like reflecting back on Kevin, who like believed in me and wanted me a part of this anthology, but also being like, we're so far distant. I've never been to the shop, but for me to integrate, my own experience was really nice. And it felt nice to be trusted to do that too, because I'm not sure what value people would get from it, but I hope someone does. And I hope someone does, recognize that it's the people you meet along the way that, are going to be foundational in your experiences in this very small but very vast community. So.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, if you listen to this, you can go to I think it's meanwhileanthology.com. That's the website for where you can order this book, either a print copy or a digital copy, and you can scroll through and you can see the names of some people who have contributed. Some maybe you've never heard of, some you have definitely heard of. They know some of the literal biggest names in comics, not just like currently in the last like 10, 20 some odd years. It's truly incredible. And I think it is important to talk about, I think anyone who's been to a shop, whether you go to shop regularly or something that you do every once in a while, there is an experience there. I mean, this show exists basically because of Mike and I going to the same comic shop. You know, outside of that, I don't know. We would have run in the same circles, really. I don't know. Maybe meet at a show or something like that. He would have been another guy at a show, but you meet someone at a shop and you have those conversations, and you find out what the people around you, what their interests are, what kind of books do they like, and just from talking about these silly little comic books or whatnot, you meet other people from other parts of town or whatnot, and you learn more, and your own horizons expand and things of that nature. So I think I better understand now what you're talking about with your title of Absence is Unsettling. The idea of maybe the lack of having lack of that community, that specific community. If you didn't have that, where would you be in maybe both your career and in your life in general? So I think it's I think it's a really wonderful story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I just think of the horror alternate universe of my life where I got into comics as an adult, and had I not walked into a shop that was like affirming and curious and wanted to get to know me, non-judgmental about whatever kind of stuff you want to get into, just like, oh, you're into that, that's awesome. And it was a magnet for those people. I'll shout them out there. They're now called Apotheosis Comic Lounge in St. Louis. And still has, now they're like a coffee and wine bar as well as a comic shop.
Yeah, I saw the update recently.
And they do stand-ups. And I was
quite amazing.
It was not on South Grand when I lived there, but they had just moved there as I was leaving St. Louis. Anyway, really great shop. And I'm like, man, if I had gone to like some comic shop where it was people like, yelling at each other and gatekeeping and shaming people for reading certain books, if it was Twitter in person, I would have I would have turned around and gone back out and never had this huge part of my life now. So yeah, it makes me really thankful. And then the note that I had here was I'd read this last night, and in your intro, you mentioned a history of manga. And usually the only time I encounter black and white is manga. And I had to remind myself the order to read things in. But there are certain pages here where I'm like, adding color would be kind of gilding the lily here. Like this feels very intentionally in black and white. And you've done an incredible. In fact, my favorite American comic of all time, well, Western comic of all time, is The Underwater Whaler by Jeff Lemire, which has no color. So it's just curious when I get drawn to things like this. But I'm a manga novice, but I did think to myself, oh yeah, they could do manga just as easily as Western comics. I'll say I'm enough of a manga aficionado that my daughter's name did come from a manga.
You don't gotta
really?
tell people that. You can you don't got to tell people, you don't got to spoil it like that, Mike. You can say it was a coincidence, but
look, her name's Anya, which is Spy Family. And people who know, because I will say her name to people, and every once in a while I'll see like something light up in their eyes, and they've made the connection, but they think that there's no way I'm into manga. And then I'll say like, yeah, we were both reading this book, and like, it was like
that's
a hot
that
Cincinnati
gatekeeping mentality.
Oh yeah. But it was like a crazy hot Cincinnati summer. My wife was in her third trimester, and it was like, there's nothing fun to do. And this manga shop just opened in our neighborhood. So
cute.
I got this book, and we were both just like giggling to ourselves in bed, reading these, like passing the volumes back and forth at night. And it was just
that's
like
the best.
Well, that, and we were really bickering over names. I was coming up with obscure Danish names that I wanted, and she was shooting them down. So anyway, yeah, just wanted to shout out that it's only 7 pages, but it's a very profound 7 pages.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that.
We both just love that. And I cannot remember if you mentioned this when we were recording or pre-recording, but you work with Cadence. That's where people can go just to buy original pieces. Do you take commissions, Patreon, Substack, any of that stuff? Or is it just, here's where you can go buy things I already made?
commissions. My covers are available. I have a Patreon that has not only a sticker club, but a print club. And I am going to be at a ton of conventions this year. So,
Okay.
could
Which
always
makes
DM
working
me,
digitally
ask.
that much
Yes.
more handy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Working on the road,
Absolutely.
working from the show. So
Great. Is there anything coming up? Any new publications, new books that you're allowed to talk about that you want to tell people like, hey, when you see this show up in your comic shop, be sure to grab it.
Yeah. I have, I'm sure, a ton of covers coming out soon, but I also have, there's Pop's Chocolate Shop just got reannounced. So Jordan and I are back together again, doing a short for that. But then I also have, I think it was announced, and I hope it was announced, and I'm allowed to talk about it, but the Godzilla 70th anniversary, I'm working on a story with Casey Gilly. Very, very, very excited about that. Quite a surprise that you will see in that. It was just announced yesterday on Godzilla.com, so hopefully.
Okay.
And I have a couple other
official for us. Yeah. Love Godzilla.
And then we have, I am working on the finale of Beyond Real. I think Jorge Corona is also on the issue with me. It's one of the most stunning series I've ever seen. Vault Comics has really done such a really cool thing with Beyond Real. Zach Kaplan is phenomenal to work with. And that should be out later this year. So you could either pick up all single issues or the trade paperback when it comes out. I'm so honored to be a part of that book. It's filled with incredible artists and it's just going to be so stunning.
Jorge Corona is, I mean, he's phenomenal. I love
he's one of my favorites.
Work. Yeah. The stuff that he's been doing kind of recently, I guess, with Scotty Young, as Scotty Young is just kind of writing some work. I absolutely love his stuff. Yeah, I think Beyond Real has the second issue might be, or just the first one may be out right now. I gotta double check here. So it may be a few months now before the final issue is out there.
And when you say right now, this episode comes out weeks from now. So
it could
perfect.
Be, yeah.
Even if you're right now, you'll be wrong in a couple weeks, or if you're
that is
if
true.
you're wrong now, you'll still be wrong.
That's right. So if the Godzilla news is actually not supposed to come out now, as we're talking, you actually have a couple weeks. So maybe by a couple weeks you'll be all right there. So
hopefully you could see me in Lexington, which would be great. And I think I just got announced for you might miss it. Central Florida Comic Con is next week, and I'm also announced I think for Richmond, Virginia GalaxyCon, which I think is in March or April.
It'll be in the show notes. Well, we'll edit the show notes.
So
I looked at that.
GalaxyCon is amazing. I highly recommend those shows if you want to experience a new convention. I know they have a couple of new cities this year, so definitely check it out.
Getting a lot bigger. They're expanding a lot into their shows there. So as someone who had lived in Richmond for a while, as I mentioned, I've been to that show once. I flew back out there a couple years ago. So it's nice when I went. It's on the list, and maybe I may travel out to just to get back to the city again. I should. But Lexington,
I can't wait. I've never been there.
It's the GalaxyCon shows are they. I remember them a couple years ago when they weren't that big, and then it seems like in the last 2 years they've jumped in quality and just in their setup, their organization, everything about it is so much better now. And you look at the creators that are showing up on at these shows, and it's mind blowing. It's like, oh, I got to see this person, this and this here. I got to get to these shows. So definitely, if you see a show in the area around you, and you see Liana there, definitely show up and stop by our table and give them a lot of money.
I love meeting people. So please come by and say hello.
I really thought you were going to say I love money. Which was the second
I also love money, so please give me money.
Money is
so
great
much.
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Sorry we went a little over what we asked for, but we'll make it up with money in person in Lexington.
Yes. What else will I leave my nieces and nephews? I truly had such an amazing time talking to you both. Thank you so much for having me on. I could have talked for like 4 more hours, so please have me back on soon.
We'll do that. Maybe we'll cover another book. Maybe we'll cover True Cult at some point, maybe down the line a little bit.
I would love that.
We'll have you back at some point, definitely.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.